Next on to European Climate Foundation perspective, Jules.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. The European Climate Foundation is a philanthropic organization based in Europe, and we work to help governments put in place those policies that lead to significant reductions in emissions. Over the last 18 months, we've been involved in a very ambitious program called Roadmap 2050. We engaged with a significant number of consulting firms, including McKinsey and Company, some 15 large corporate organizations involved in the power sector, the electricity grids, and the equipment supply arena, and a number of NGOs. And what we set out to do was to frame for ourselves and for policymakers what the 80% commitment that European leaders made in Italy last year, an 80% emission reduction commitment by 2050, what that would mean for the way in which we deal with energy across Europe. It was a daunting challenge. Looking at 80%, it made us realize very quickly that on the one hand, we have to drive energy efficiency to the maximum possibility across all of the sectors. But even if we do that, we will not get to that 80% emission reduction. So the next thing we identified was critically necessary is to switch much of our energy supply to electricity. And then, of course, to produce that electricity in a CO2 neutral way. The striking findings of the Roadmap 2050 is that such a CO2 neutral power sector in Europe is technically feasible and economically affordable as long as we do it on a pan-European scale. And it's the combination of those three components that I think is quite relevant to the discussion here this afternoon. It is technically feasible on the basis of existing technologies. All of our modeling was done on the basis of technologies that are currently available. Yes, we assumed learning curves, but we did not assume any technology breakthroughs. Next, it is economically affordable. We need to deploy more capital, and although as a percentage of the total capital in the European economy, the increase is moderate, in terms of the capital required within the energy system, it's actually a significant increase in capital. Not an increase we can't finance, but still almost a doubling. But where we deploy more capital, our operating cost will come down. So the next important conclusion from our work is that it is economically affordable. But finally, and very importantly, we can only do this if we do it on a European-wide scale. And why is that European connectivity so crucial? Because what we found is that the volatility or the variability in supply of renewable energy across Europe is actually negatively correlated. If the wind doesn't blow on the North Sea, it's likely that it blows on the Atlantic Ocean. And if it's rainy and gray up here in the north, the sun might be shining in the south. And along the same way, the demand for power is negatively correlated across Europe. And we know this. When we in the northern part of Europe have long gone to bed, the Spanish are just getting ready to make dinner. And the time zone differences between Central and Eastern Europe and the UK also work to our advantage. So we need to connect Europe, but then it is technically feasible and economically affordable to move to zero carbon power generation by 2050, and as a result reduce our emissions by 80%. Now 7 technologies turn out to be critical in order to achieve that. And our studies show that we need to maximize the opportunities in these 7 technologies. It's wind, both onshore and offshore. It's solar power, concentrated solar and photovoltaic. It is the grid, both the super grid that connects all of the European countries and the smart grid that helps us manage demand. It's all forms of bioenergy and biochemistry. It's carbon capture and storage. Very importantly, it's energy efficiency across the whole spectrum, but particularly in the built environment. And finally, it's the new drivetrains for the automotive sector of the future. Now, in those 7 sectors, I believe the Industrial Revolution for the next 20, 30 years will play out. We are absolutely convinced that Europe can play an important role in that Industrial Revolution. But we have to move fast because it's happening now. We'll get on to what China is doing in our discussion, I'm sure. But the degree of competitive intensity that China is displaying in each of these sectors that I just mentioned is enormous. And for us as Europeans to continue to play a role and not find ourselves to be the dinosaurs of the next Industrial Revolution, we need to invest, we need to grow those sectors, we need to create policy frameworks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I won't repeat, very clear in terms of the 7 technology pathways.